Good evening, everyone. Today we will continue our Sri Ram cycle. We have already reached the 11th chapter, the most beautiful state of mind and heart. I still hold the firm expectation that you will read the book. I see that some of you have already started reading. Look at that. For those who are not yet familiar, this is the book. The idea is that next year we will begin a new cycle. I am still considering which book we will see. And may we, little by little, encourage the reading of a good book that is not so well known to the Brazilian public. So, get to know it. Sri Ram is a relatively recent philosopher who passed away in 1973 and is truly worth knowing. Our topic today, the most beautiful state of mind and heart, will address an aspect. Remember that I always have the habit of making a synthesis. A word or a key expression for you to leave here with. It is interesting for those who work in advertising, you know that, in general, we retain a very small percentage of the information we receive. So, it is important that we decide what we are going to keep. This lecture, fundamentally, was about something called inner life. And we don't really know what it's about, what inner life is. We wake up and spend the day focused on what is happening outside. Does a life exist within us? At what moment? Do we ever stop to talk to ourselves and evaluate what we feel, what we think, who we are, what our true identity is, internal dialogue, identity, all of this that great philosophers throughout history have summarized as inner life? He will speak about what is the most beautiful state of mind and heart. In other words, what is the inner state in which we should permanently dwell so that our external life unfolds in the best possible way? In general, when we face problems of any kind, sadness, depression, loneliness, whatever it may be, we think about changing things on the outside. And this conception of ours is somewhat curious, because it's as if a teenager didn't like their pimples and decided to change the mirror. It's more or less the same idea. If we don't like our own face, the fault does not lie with the mirror. Something needs to be changed in the face itself. In general, we plan external things. I will change my life. It even becomes a bit amusing. I will travel. I will change my address. I will get a new car. And, evidently, the sense of fulfillment that is missing in this inner emptiness, something that nothing and no one outside can fill, will go with you wherever you go. I had a friend some years ago who worked in the field of psychiatry. He used to say that he treated a large number of people with depression, and that there was a strong insistence from their families for these people to travel. He used to say, look, if a person with depression is going to travel, take the psychiatrist alone, because at least one of you will have fun, because it makes no difference otherwise. You will carry with you whatever internal factors you possess. That is, your response to the environment. And while the environment may change, your response remains the same. So, what would human happiness be? What would human balance be? What would it mean to have the ability not to depend on circumstances in order to be well? Because, deep down, this is what we must do, because circumstances will always be changeable and unpredictable. This is the law of the manifested world. As long as there is heat, there will be cold. As long as there is softness, there will be resistance. High and low. The laws of the manifested world foresee duality, and from it, multiplicity. You do not know what will be on the other side of your door tomorrow, and perhaps not even before you reach it. We do not know. And therefore, we must have the ability to respond to circumstances in a way that does not throw us off balance, that preserves our state of peace, happiness, and emotional equilibrium. One of the most difficult things we face in the present moment, for example, is the total inability to deal with certain feelings, certain emotional reactions, such as fear. We fall into panic, which is the fear of being afraid. Have you ever noticed that? When the sensation of fear arises, we lose control. Panic is the fear of being afraid. You will notice that in public events, when an accident occurs, more people sometimes die from being trampled than from burns or intoxication. People do not know how to deal with their own fear. It turns into an irrational herd. So, this knowledge, knowing how to maintain oneself, knowing how to ensure your own stability in circumstances where you can secure a reasonably balanced and happy life, does not depend on external circumstances. Throughout the history of humanity, we have experienced many different ways of life, each quite distinct from the other. Sometimes at night, I find myself reflecting on this. For most of human history, we did not have, for example, electricity. When we lose power at home for a single day, we feel completely helpless. There was no electricity. You would walk around the house with a candle, surrounded by absolute darkness. Everyone had to manage this way, and many people found happiness in such circumstances. We did not have many of the comforts we enjoy today, nor many of the risks that come with them either. Life has been different in countless ways, and there have always been people who, regardless of their circumstances, remained humane and found happiness. So, where do happiness, balance, and human stability truly come from? If we depend on circumstances, we are lost, because circumstances will never be uniform. They will change, they will fluctuate. This is the law of life. We must find a way to secure ourselves, to build ourselves from the inside out. Of course, remember, I want to make this very clear to you. There is a well-established human journey which moves from ignorance to wisdom, and, in between, the love of wisdom, that is, philosophy. If you turn to me and ask, have you already achieved this? I will say no, but I am striving for it. A philosopher is not perfect. He possesses the spirit of self-improvement. What sets a philosopher apart from an ordinary person is that he has a goal of wisdom and does not give up on pursuing it. But do not think that we have ready-made solutions. We simply know where we want to go. This means that we may fall 1,000 times and rise 1,001, always knowing how to keep moving forward. This is the distinguishing feature of philosophy. It gives us a goal and a spirit of self-improvement. So all of us are seeking this, myself included. Let us then talk a little about this aspect of inner life. He says, there is a desirable state of mind and heart, where you can act both inwardly and outwardly, with freedom, harmony, vitality and joy, peace and inner rest. So, it is interesting that, as we mentioned just a moment ago, the world is dual. If you have an external world that is highly in motion, you must have a fixed center, otherwise you will lose yourself. Think of that compass you used back in school, where you fixed the sharp point at the center and rotated the movable arm to draw a circle. Carl Jung, in fact, speaks about this psychic structure of the center and the circumference. You act with great freedom and security along the circumference, as long as you do not lose the center. When you lose the center too much, that is, your identity, you begin to oscillate and identify with different points along this circumference. And, therefore, experiencing the world in a very differentiated, very unstable way, it becomes very painful. You lose the sense of having your feet on the ground. You lose the sense of a fixed point of support. There is, in fact, a very beautiful Eastern poem that speaks about this. The mountain does not move, the troops advance along its slopes. In other words, it shows the whole world in motion, while the mountain remains still. We must have within ourselves a fixed point. Extreme eccentricity can even lead to a loss of reason. It can give rise to a kind of mental alienation. And, in general, in our current society, we are even encouraged to be a bit eccentric. And it is possible to lose control of this eccentricity, for it to fluctuate and for us never to find the center again. Because it is fashionable, so to speak, for human beings to change according to circumstances. Our current society proposes this as a way of life. This weakens us emotionally in a terrible way. So he says, there is an inner peace and rest. In fact, Sri Ram, in this book and in all his books, repeats this 1,000,000 times. If you are going to take anything from these lectures, take this. Human happiness is inner peace and serenity. Everything else is a consequence. From this fixed point of the compass, you master the sphere of your life. And you master it with confidence, creating a perfect sphere with all points equidistant from the center. Otherwise, you will have a shapeless blot. Your life will become a shapeless blot. If you secure the center, the periphery will be harmonious. Human happiness, its starting point, is inner peace and serenity. And everything else will be given to you as an addition, as the biblical tradition says. Then, you can act outwardly by projecting this point of view from the center, which is your identity, onto all things. Do you remember that phrase we spoke about the week before last? The more within, the more without. I have freedom, I have boldness, I have imagination to act outwardly when I am with my feet firmly grounded in the center. I have an identity that is well established and well known to me. I have the habit of internal dialogue. I know who I am. Then, he has the ability to craft my own responses to circumstances. And not a ready-made template that society gave me when I was born. I live, I am not lived. This is the fundamental element about which he will speak. Otherwise, we are discontented and restless. Always. In one of his lectures, in one of the previous chapters, he said that not even in sleep, we are calm. We transfer to our dream consciousness the restlessness of our waking state. Not even in sleep are we at peace. It is an anguish of searching for something we do not know, which is the worst kind of anguish. We do not know exactly what we are missing, but we are absolutely certain that something is missing. We are always searching for the something outside ourselves, and it is nowhere to be found out there, nor could it be. So we live in a state of anguish, of restlessness, which we sometimes do not even notice, because there is no contrast. A single moment of peace will give you the contrast. You will realize, wow, what a hell my life usually is. This is the problem with having a moment of deep awareness. You compare, and your life is never the same again. I once joked with my students and said something curious. It's a problem to experience something of great quality. Because afterwards, everything else you experience does not meet the same standard. Do you notice this? A good wine, a good coffee, a good olive oil. Everything you have at home is ruined. It's good for nothing. It never meets your standard again. And before, you didn't feel anything. You thought it was great. But now you have a point of comparison. Isn't that so? These gourmets who make us taste such fine things are terrible. Automatically, everything you have at home is worthless. So, contrast generates the state of consciousness, an increase in peace. And I have a reference point. I know what that is, and I want to return there. And this hectic life of mine, this constant state of anxiety and lack, is no longer acceptable. That is what makes a philosopher. People say, poor philosopher, always searching for himself. But at least he knows what he is searching for. Because everyone is searching, but they don't even know what it is they seek. And the philosopher has a goal. And he will say that we only want a greater quantity of what we already have. Because since we also don't know what it is, as I've spoken about at length in previous talks, since we don't know what we lack, we take a list of what we already have and think we need to have more of it. Because those are the only values we know. So, I am anxious. Maybe it's because this apartment is too small. Maybe it's because my car isn't new. Maybe it's because my salary doesn't match my worth. Maybe it's because Brasilia has a terrible climate. I need to move to a better city. In other words, I keep adding more of what I already have. This is both amusing and curious. There is an Eastern parable that tells of a fish talking to a turtle. The turtle is amphibious, meaning it lives in two environments. It goes out, walks on land, and then returns to the water. And the fish is extremely curious to know where she goes. How can you explain to a fish what land is? She says, look, you won't be able to understand. No, try to explain. I am intelligent. I am a clever fish. Don't explain it. Then the turtle says, look, it's not like this. It's not even wet. It's dry. He keeps trying to imagine dry water. No, it's not like that. It's not homogeneous. It's made up of little pieces. He imagines water full of little lumps. He has to work with what he has. So he says, if you don't experience peace, you won't know what peace is. A moment of being with yourself will introduce you to a new dimension, and then you will have a reference and will want to return there again and again. Do you see this? It is necessary to have a reference point. Then, afterwards, you will have the possibility to find your way back and return to that place. So, this is the serenity that we must strive to attain. I mentioned to you, in fact, in one of these talks, that some time ago a research institute, which I can no longer recall, conducted a study. They called it the happiness curve. There was a time when this topic was widely discussed, especially when Bhutan established that index of population happiness. They created a happiness curve. It was a Cartesian graph where they would plot a person. They have 0 material possessions. If you give them 1, then 2, the happiness curve rises. There comes a certain point when, if you give a third, say, someone has 2 cars, the third no longer adds much. The fourth will even begin to generate existential anguish. I don't know what to do with so many cars, and they're not adding anything to my life. I am just paying more taxes on them. So it begins, there comes a certain point when, as material possessions increase, this is what happens. It rises up to a certain point, then stabilizes, and starts to decline. That's why it's common to see people who have a very high level of material wealth begin to experience depression and existential anguish, because they no longer know where to turn. Whatever they could imagine in terms of quantity, they already possess, and the quality of life has not changed. So, where I will go now? This creates a wall with virtually no alternatives. And it is said that when people fall into this existential anguish, without perspective, this is the drama of our current society, my friends. One day, I still believe, and medicine is already beginning to touch on this, it will go around in circles, but eventually it will get there. One day, it will finally conclude that most of the physical ailments we suffer from stem from an endless psychological anguish that hangs in the air of today's society. A lack of perspective, a fear of stopping to think, to reflect on oneself, to contemplate one's own life and find nothing there. So, it becomes a constant escape outward. And when circumstances do not meet the person's expectations, they begin to see themselves as a victim. And, in general, it is a constant psychological cycle. Then they start spending, seeking distraction in worldly things, or becoming addicted to many things just to avoid having time to think about themselves. A multitude of escapes, which then leads to physical and psychological ailments. Sooner or later, we will come to the conclusion that most modern ailments are psychosomatic. They arise from existential anguish. And one of the consequences of this is that you begin to lash out at others because you are dissatisfied with yourself. The conscience, not wanting to take responsibility for itself, delegates it elsewhere. It starts to look for someone to blame. And there is a kind of escape valve mechanism that you have probably noticed. That person who explodes, argues with everyone, and then suddenly becomes calm and tranquil, having released all their tension. Then you look at them and think, weren't they just irritated a moment ago? They made everyone in the house upset, and now they're calm. Have you ever seen this happen? It is something that happens quite often. They argue, create chaos, stir up confusion, make everyone feel bad, and then she will. They go and bother the birds in the house, the dogs, and feel at ease, thinking, I've done my part. In other words, they release their tension by being aggressive. And it is said that this is a more common coping mechanism than we might imagine. Aggression that arises from the need to lash out at someone because of deep dissatisfaction. That someone was supposed to be yourself. So, you outsource it, you project it, you throw it outside yourself. These are the roots that lie beneath the surface of our problems. And, in general, we do not see them. We express qualities that merge with one another without compulsion. And this is something else entirely. Here is a little list of things I hope you take away from these talks. If you can fit one more into your memory pouch, add this one too. A human being does not have just 1, 2, or 3 qualities. In general, a person has one quality, which is an inner life and being at peace with oneself. And this is expressed, according to the circumstances, in countless ways. Can you imagine a person who is deep, serene, at peace with their own conscience, and expresses themselves with generosity, but not with justice? With love, but not with kindness? How could that be? Doesn't that seem strange? Deep down, we know that all these things are simply facets, like those of a prism. Facets of a single center. Manifestations of a single center. As a person conquers themselves, they leave a mark on the world, which is the mark of their human identity. And human identity is very beautiful. When it manifests as beauty in countless forms, like a prism in countless colors, but all of which emanate from a central white. He will say, peace, be careful, because peace is not indolence, peace is not passivity. Think of something complicated, as my dear friends from Paraíba say. Think of something complicated. It is this confusion that we make nowadays between peace and passivity. A peaceful citizen is someone who does nothing. No, that is someone who is passive. Peace is like life itself. Life is very peaceful. Imagine a cell. It is extremely well organized. If you try to introduce some aggressive element, what happens? The immune system comes in and expels everything that doesn't belong. Peace requires order. It requires harmony. Therefore, it requires immunity. It requires defense. Peace has an aspect of life's tension in that it sustains itself according to principle. It does not allow just anything to enter. So, the peaceful person is not a passive one. Peace is not indolence. It does not block action or change. It simply resists the environment. Peace is like the immunity of our consciousness. It ensures that we will leave our mark on the world and not let the world deform us. It moves from the inside out. It's as if you imagine a writer who is writing, and suddenly the content of what he writes is determined by the type of paper, the type of pen, and the ink. No, with this pen. I can't write a book, only a short story, because the ink runs out. How so? Do these things serve you? Did you come here to leave your mark on the world, and are you the one who tells these things how they should serve you? And not the other way around? Imagine if you were the pen, the ink, and the paper, determining the content of humanity's literary works. In other words, we came to shape circumstances. If the circumstance does not exist, I create it. Isn't that so? Where there is a will, there is a way. Shakespeare would not have stopped writing what he wrote just because his quill had little ink. Make do, I do it. I invent the ink if I have to. But what I came to say to the world, I will say. Even when there were no pens, no quills, nothing at all, people still left their message to the world. They found a way and they left it. In other words, human beings are builders of circumstances, not mere constructions of circumstances. We cannot show who we are to the world as humanity or as individuals. You do not state your purpose here. Who are you? What is the message you came to bring to the world? We must declare our purpose for being here, and to do so, we must be masters of our circumstances, not slaves to them. Thus, this resistance to the environment is something he always speaks about, as well. A well-tuned violin string. There is even a passage in Buddhism where, upon attaining enlightenment, the Buddha witnesses this, a young woman playing a veena on a boat passing along the river. The string cannot be too loose, for then it will not sound, nor can it be too tight, because when you play it, it vibrates so intensely that it breaks. A neurotic person, someone who is unbalanced, when the wind blows, vibrates too violently. In other words, on one side, there is a person who is static, and on the other, a person who does not act, they only react. Depending on how things come from the environment, he reacts. He vibrates according to the wind. He vibrates according to whatever passes through him. I don't know if you remember Forrest Gump, but the first scene of the film is exactly a feather floating in the air. And he spends the entire film trying not to be a feather, despite his intellectual limitations. In other words, a feather is not its own master. It is a slave to the wind. We are not feathers. We have the freedom to steer our boat in the direction we choose. So, human beings did not come into this world to remain static or merely to react. We are here to act. Each person has a message to discover, a message they must deliver. So, dive within yourself, discover your identity, and then go out and communicate that identity to the world. You act, you do not merely react. Your actions in the world cannot be merely a response to what others have done to you. I remember once, I am standing in line at the bank. Yes, even waiting in line at the bank can be philosophical. I am in the bank line, and there were two elderly gentlemen in front of me. I'm not sure exactly what they were there to do, but they were quite advanced in age. I know the conversation went something like this. I was eavesdropping, of course, since there was nothing else I could do. They were talking, One said, when I was young, I wanted to go abroad, but my parents didn't allow it. Then, soon after, I got married. I wanted to do certain things, to live in the countryside, but my wife didn't want to. Then the children came, and there had to be a school, there had to be a hospital. Then, soon after, I started working. I wanted to take a university course in something or other, but my boss needed something else, so I did what he needed. In other words, his life was what others had made of it. There wasn't a single action he recounted that showed any sense of agency. His life was what others had made of it. Do you know the story of the billiard ball? You aim and wham into that pocket. It doesn't have the freedom to arrive and say, I'll roll into that pocket. It rolls wherever it's pushed, and if it goes wrong, it's the cue's fault. Isn't that so? Victimization. Transferring responsibility. And life boils down to that. And what did you have to say to the world? I don't know. Let someone else do it. No one will tell the world what you had to say. Your identity is unique and unrepeatable. So, the world will keep on speaking. Action must be free, an expression of the inner being. Action must be free, an expression of the inner being. Since I am recalling movies, I remember one very well, which I also like a lot, which is 1492, Conquest of Paradise. That film, for those who don't know, is about the life of Christopher Columbus, which was written at the time by his son. Has anyone here seen this film? Do you remember that the film begins with a very beautiful scene? He is peeling an orange with his son by the sea. And he says, my son, one thing I want to teach you is that you must be able to see with your own eyes, to listen with your own ears. You will hear everyone saying that the world is flat. Now, look at that ship moving away on the sea. Do you notice that if the world were flat, it would just get smaller and smaller, turn into a dot, and disappear? Watch what happens. Then he shows the orange. First, the hull disappears. Then the rudder, the lower sails, and finally, that little flag at the very top will vanish. Do you realize that this is a ship moving across a spherical surface? And the sun looks and says, that's true. Exactly. See for yourself. With your own eyes, that's why you have eyes. Listen with your own ears, that's why you have ears. Do you think that the Christian message, when Jesus Christ says, let those who have eyes to see, see, and those who have ears to hear, hear, was he speaking about physical eyes and ears? Probably not. Would a master of such a high degree speak of things so simple? Probably not. So, he says, we have come to express what is within our being, to deliver our message to the world. External stimuli are like electrical stimuli applied to a laboratory animal. He mentions this, and in fact, he condemns it, but it is something that happens scientific experiments on animals. He says, sometimes needles are inserted or electric shocks are given to the animal's brain so that it exhibits certain automatic reactions. In the name of science, he definitely does not approve of this. But the fact is, if we transfer this analogy, for us it is not very different. The stimulus comes, and we give an automatic, even predictable, response. So much so that someone observing from the outside can even predict what a person will do in certain circumstances. I will say something that you might find bizarre, but criminals, bandits, they actually have a good dose of psychology. Did you know that? Because when a person is walking down the street, the way they gesture, the way they walk, you can perceive how much they conform to the norm, how much they are part of the masses. And it is much easier to act upon a person who is massified than upon someone who possesses some degree of individuality. Because you know exactly what they are going to do, and you are prepared for it. Either they become hysterical and you eliminate them right away, or they become catatonic and you take everything from them, even taking them along with it. And they are prepared for both of these reactions. But they are not prepared for a person with self-control, lucidity, and who is seeking opportunities to get out of that situation. There is no response for that, Because human intelligence is multifaceted, anything can emerge from it. It is a very high risk. And sometimes, just by walking down the street and by the way someone handles their belongings, they gain some understanding of human psychology through observation. That one is easy. Every now and then they make a mistake, but it is very rare. Very rare indeed. In general, they know how to observe and they know where they have an easy target. Do you know why? Because they are reactive people, not active ones. Professor Michel Echenique, who brought New Acropolis to Brazil and has since passed away, used to tell us, although I did not witness this myself, and perhaps some of you may even know about it, that when these lightning kidnappings began to happen, there was one in Sao Paulo where they tried to rob a bank. The police surrounded them, and an elderly man and his grandson were taken as hostages to negotiate the criminals' escape. Two of the criminals negotiated for a car and put the young man in the front seat with one of the criminals, while the elderly man sat in the back seat. And he would say, as he recounted this, that he would have loved to see the scene. He never had the chance to witness it. There must be footage somewhere of this elderly man. He walked out to the car together with the criminals, and it seemed as if he were going for a stroll in the park. He waved to the press, gestured, and spoke with the utmost naturalness. When they sat him in the back seat, it is said that he spoke with the criminal as if he were chatting with a friend at a bar, with the greatest naturalness in the world. When the criminal least expected it, he simply made this gesture. He grabbed the barrel of the revolver and threw it out the window. In seconds, he threw it. Then the police took control of the situation in the front, and that was the end of the story. He was a war veteran. And with the composure he displayed, he could have done anything. And that criminal had no way of predicting it. Do you know why? He was lucid. He was in control. And this is something impossible to foresee what a lucid person will do. A person who is conditioned by the masses is easy to predict. In other words, someone who is capable of expressing their inner being in the world is unpredictable. It is a spectacle. You cannot presume what will happen. We do not know what will come next. It is the spectacle of human nature. It is incredibly rich. It holds unimaginable possibilities. Otherwise, we are puppets, just like that test subject there. It depends on who is pulling the strings. We have no individuality, none at all. In India, Sanskrit has a word that is often mentioned, which for them is synonymous with happiness, Vairagya. Vairagya, in fact, its most accurate translation would be serenity, impartiality, or detachment. It is a person who knows how to deal with all things as if they were alone from nature to them. They treat everything in the best possible way, but have a true and profound awareness that the only thing that truly belongs to them is themselves. And this self is nothing else. No one and nothing can take that away from them. Your essence, your identity. In fact, Sri Ram has another book in which he says something so beautiful that I have to share it with you. But it has nothing to do with this book. Forgive me. It has nothing to do with this story, and yet it has everything to do with it. Because he says the following: when you have a word, a concept, something you are certain of, if 7 billion human beings were to come and tell you otherwise, they would not shake you, because within you, this has deep roots. Are you sure? Are you sure, for example, that true love exists? It is not just mechanical. It is not just instinct. It is not just manipulation. This has roots of very deep perception within me. I have already felt something of it. I have already sensed it. I have already seen, more or less, what it is. I have a profound experience of love. If 7 billion people come to me and say that love does not exist, well, all right, I respect your opinion. You are many. I am not going to argue with 7 billion. But it does not change me. He says that when you have this, it can be anything, a word, an idea. You have a boat. Do you remember that Egyptian symbolism of the boat of Isis? You have a boat through which your consciousness can travel through eternity. When your consciousness loses that boat, that vehicle, you have a boat. Your consciousness will not lose its foundation. It will not be lost in time. It possesses something that transcends time, a certainty, a truth, and you are already assured. You already transcend time. Can you imagine that? The waters of eternity will shelter you if you have a boat. something you have realized through a profound experience, something that nothing and no one can take from you. Once you have it, you are never lost again. The waters of eternity will receive your boat, and you do not sink, you do not founder. Isn't that fascinating? And he says, in a highly poetic way, build your boat. In short, your life is not much more than this. Build your own boat. Even if it is just one thing. You must have a deep inner experience, your own. Incommunicable, impossible to be taken from you. Eternity is open. It is the boat of millions of years of the Egyptians. He then says that the reaction to pleasure, and we can perceive this, automatically generates a desire that binds us to the object. And it is this reaction that will make us fragile, because we can perfectly well enjoy things, but not think they belong to us, nor fear losing them. Because when you have this idea, it's beautiful, it's mine, the object has trapped you. And, in a certain way, you become its slave. And now, wherever it goes, you will run after it. And if you lose it, you will suffer. Do you see? Automatically, it has enslaved you. When you deal with things, it is natural that they bring us pleasure, that they give us satisfaction. But when they generate a sense of possession in you, they have automatically enslaved you. Poverty or fear? By no means. A panic so intense that I would not survive experiencing something like that. In some way, this has bound you. In other words, it is something that, for you, is more important than your own essence. In any case, no. If I had to give up my essence for this, I would not do it. Of course, I will avoid this as much as I can, but if I have to go through it or corrupt myself, I will not corrupt myself. I don't know if you understand this. Once again, I repeat, we are presenting this as a reference point of wisdom. We are not saying that anyone here has achieved this. I always share a story in my classes, because there is a tradition I deeply appreciate, which is the tradition of the Inca people. You know that the Incas were defeated by the Spanish. A few hundred Spaniards, led by Francisco Pizarro, defeated millions of Incas. At a time when the empire was still very strong, and they resorted to every kind of tactic. They played dirty, attacking the civilian population, massacring women and children. When the warriors had gone off to battle, they destroyed food supplies, burned crops, doing things the Incas themselves would never do. They made alliances, sowed discord among them, playing dirty in every possible way. And, in the end, when the Incas were already besieged in a city called Vilcabamba, whose exact location was never known, the Spanish sent an ambassador to negotiate with the emperor, the Sapa Inca, as the emperor was called, Tupac Amaru. And there was no agreement. They refused to surrender. But before leaving, Tupac Amaru made a point. Forgive me, it was the Spanish ambassador who insisted on asking this emperor. Look, I have a curiosity, since I am here. When we fought against you for the first time, our European, Spanish method of battle was something new. It makes sense that you were defeated. The second time, all right. The third time, fine. But by the 10th, the 100th time you were defeated, didn't people start doing the same thing to us? Why didn't they start burning our supplies, killing our horses? Why didn't they play the same game with us? Then it is said that this emperor, so the story goes, though no one will ever know if it was real or not, it didn't exist. Written there among the Incas, it is said that this emperor turned to him and said, "Look, we Incas only want the earth. If it is to stand upright upon it, if it is to crawl upon the earth, we would rather leave it to you." And I always remember this when Sri Ram speaks of such things. Fear, we all feel fear, but to what extent can we trade everything for fear? Desire, every now and then we all experience it, but to what extent could we trade everything for desire, you see? If we are truly human beings, we must have a central touchstone, something that cannot be exchanged for anything else, which is our very essence, our own identity. If I say to a plant, if you don't perform photosynthesis, I will kill you, it will perform photosynthesis. If you perform photosynthesis, I'll give you a little gift. It will not allow itself to be corrupted. Why is that? Because its identity, the plant's identity, can't be negotiated. Now it has no choice, we do. And we should do the same. Whatever you do, I will respond to the world as a human being. The plant will respond as a plant, the animal as an animal. I cannot be anything else. I came into this world for this purpose, and to be human is to embody virtues and wisdom. If you want something different, ask another being, another category. You cannot ask lemon trees to bear apples. To be human is to have human behavior. And so, he says that when we react in such a way that objects enslave us, we lose our happiness. When external circumstances enslave us, we lose our happiness. To understand this allows us to see its opposite, the complete absence of greed. He speaks of this, and I find it so beautiful, because he is one of the authors I know who gives the most detailed guidance. He says, observe the moment when you see something desirable. You will notice that, first, you go there and observe, then comes the emotional response, which says, I like it, I want it. You notice this chain reaction, and you will realize that you have become a prisoner. You can feel this. All you need to do is shift your awareness slightly away from your psyche and observe it from the outside. You will notice it. Mind, I saw. Emotions, I like it and I want it, and you realize that you are trapped. If you notice this from the outside, you can free yourself from it. You must become aware of this. You need to realize that within our psychic mechanism, there are two speeds. The mind is faster than the emotions, and it is easier to cleanse, because it is more subtle. So, when you have a thought, for example, a critical thought about something or someone, it happens in fractions of a second. Afterwards, anger, resentment, or sadness will arise. You have time to cut off this thought before the emotion arrives. Because once the emotion comes, it is much harder to cleanse anger than a thought. Emotion is like spilled ink. Cleaning it up can sometimes take your whole day, and if you're not careful, it can take your whole life. Emotion is like spilled ink. You notice when the mind pushes, grabs the glass. So, he speaks a lot about the importance of having mental discipline, as if it were a law. This kind of thought, no. Did it arise? No. Cut it off immediately. Bam, 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 bam. Instantly, as a process of discipline we impose on ourselves. Practice this. I know it is not easy. Practice this. Because once the emotion arises, it's over. It becomes a whole day, sometimes an entire week, revolving around that. But so-and-so did it. But he said such a thing. For us, it's a lot of energy. It's a lot of energy. So, he says, if you observe this process happening, you can see that it's just like the process of a child in a laboratory, planting beans, doing those things we do when we are young. You can see it happening. And you can learn to deal with it. You have to observe yourself as if you were a laboratory object. Put the magnifying glass on yourself. Observe yourself. We must observe the mechanical processes that occur within us so that we do not become mechanical, so that we are not robots. Sometimes we go to those banking websites, shopping sites, and they ask us to type in some letters, some numbers, and then they ask, are you a robot? I think, what a philosophical question. Isn't there a space for me to write an essay? Have you ever seen this? Every time I see it, when it asks, I think, my God, they could at least give me a space to write about it. It's a truly unsettling question. Do they really think that just with those little letters and numbers, they'll reach a conclusion? I haven't managed to reach one yet. Buddhist precept, do not steal. It's interesting because it mentions that there are precepts within Buddhism, some for the general public, for lay people, and others for monks, where the requirements are much stricter. For lay people, there is this precept, do not steal. But even this precept is more subtle than we might think. It's not just about not stealing physical things. It's about not stealing attention, not stealing time. It's about not stealing another person's peace, not taking credit for someone else's merits just to be seen at any cost. You know that story about the person who, no matter what is done, always says, "But the idea was mine," or "If it weren't for me, this wouldn't have happened," or "He learned that from me." In other words, you always feel the need for the world to revolve around you, to take your share in everything, an unusual need to project your personality above others. This is a form of theft. This kind of theft, which occurs on many levels, is often more harmful and complicated the more subtle it is, stemming from a desperate need to place ourselves above others. This need drives us to take from others so that we may have more than they do. On some level, I will take. If I want to project myself at any cost, on some level, I am stealing from someone. For my personality to stand above, I have to steal someone else's little stool. Otherwise, I remain the same height as they are. And what is this little stool? 1,000 possibilities. So, even so, this concept, for the general public, is subtler than we imagine. Now, it is said that among monks, this is demanded within the Buddhist tradition. To relate to and be interested in all that is good and beautiful, without desiring anything. Wherever there is beauty, it interests me. But it is not mine, I am hers, I follow the beauty. I want to leave a trail of beauty in the world. Beauty is not mine, I belong to it. There is a film. Today I am. Movie session. Which is also interesting. For those who haven't seen it, there's a rather old French film called The Music Teacher. Basically, the film. The whole thing is very beautiful. But there are two opera singers who compete with each other, and one of them becomes famous, finds fulfillment, while the other does not. Then, in the end, his students ask him, "Why did you succeed? And so did not?" He says, "For one simple reason. He thought that music was his servant, and I am the servant of music. I serve music, not the other way around. I have spent my entire life serving music. I never presumed that it should serve me. And that is why I succeeded and he did not." I found this scene very interesting, very beautiful. Philosophers have this habit of gathering things, moments of beauty. I found it very beautiful, because that is truly how it is. Why do I not desire things? Because I am not the owner of anything. I serve the world, and not the world me. Remember that division of love I always talk to you about. Stop looking at things and asking, "What use is this to me?" Begin to look at things and ask, "How can I serve this?" In other words, to leave a trail of beauty in the world, I serve beauty, and not the other way around. It is very common for a great artist, let's say, a singer, for example, which is something that demands a certain physical structure from the body. So, it's unlikely. A singer at 60 years old will sing the same way they did at 40 or 30. Their voice will inevitably be lost. In general, they don't accept this and fall into depression. Why is that? Because they believe that the music belonged to them, and not that they were its servants. If they had this understanding, well, they would teach others to sing and serve music. I used to serve in one way, now I serve in another. Maria Callas, who is a singer I greatly admire, is suspected to have taken her own life when she lost her voice. So, imagine this, the music is my slave. In truth, we serve beauty. Therefore, we are not its owners. On the contrary, we belong to it. It is a great body in which we serve the good or the beautiful, which is the just. I serve it, not the other way around. How could the good serve me? Could beauty serve me? This insignificant little particle, does beauty serve me? It is the opposite. This gives human beings a profound sense of security, because, in some way, we can always serve. Until the very last moment of our lives, and perhaps even beyond, we can serve. The spiritual person possesses nothing, even though karma may have granted them the use of things. To renounce all material things is a spiritual truth that has been materialized and degraded. This is a heavy burden. What he says, especially considering he was born in India. He says those sannyasins, those monks who, in order to show how spiritual they are, give up their homes, the clothes on their backs, everything, they go to the desert to beg for food, have nothing, and believe that this is spiritual, are actually a degradation of a spiritual truth. Because what this person has renounced is the responsibility of caring for things. It is others who must take care of him. But if you step on his foot, he will get irritated with you because he has not let go of his own pride. He has not let go of his own vanity. He has only let go of the responsibility of taking care of things. A detached person is not someone who has nothing. She understands that the things she has and needs to have, she possesses due to karma, because every human being who programmed the human body and its needs was not us, but nature itself. So, if you need shelter, clothing, or food, it was not our choice. These are loans from nature that our good karma has allowed us to have. There is no reason for us to renounce these things, nor is this what people truly need. And this, he says, is a superficial generosity, where you simply become a burden to others, and, in general, you have not renounced at more subtle levels. More subtle levels. You are full of pride, full of vanity, full of psychological needs that are much heavier than simply possessing material things, a roof, a bed, and a plate of food. And the spiritual person knows that these things do not belong to him, but have been given for his use. He uses them and feels no guilt for doing so. As Voltaire used to say, it is not about having or not having things, but about whether things have you or not. Remember that he said, place everything you own in front of you to discover who owns whom. I find this passage very interesting. So be careful with this deterioration of spiritual teachings, which begins to take things literally. Because being truly profound, having a rich inner life, is difficult, but throwing away my house and my belongings, that is relatively easy. In a matter of minutes, I can do it, give everything to everyone, and now it is up to you to support me. And, deep down, I have given up nothing more than my own responsibility. Of course, there must be a level of highly spiritual masters up above, for whom this has a purpose, but not at our level. Everything in its own time. At our level, this ends up being a kind of vanity. Freedom from attachment to objects, to people, to country, and to race. It is a clear insight that manifests in a simple and beautiful life. Understand this. Sir Honey says, a person who possesses some degree of wisdom appreciates the land where they were born. They value its traditions, cherish its culture, respect it, and are grateful for it. They love their family, they love the race to which they belong, they respect everything, but they are not attached to anything. They would never place any of this above their principles, under any circumstances. And you perceive this clear insight, this moment of deeper identity that they possess, which stands above race, family, or the circumstances of their birth. You recognize this by the mark they leave upon the world. They are a very serene person, someone you can look at and know they are steadfast. No passing wind will be able to sweep them away. Lao Tse also used to say, and I have shared this with you before, as I find it very beautiful that when you gaze into the eyes of a sage, you see a profound gaze, one that is not only turned outward, but also inward. And there, deep within, you sense an internal dialogue, impenetrable, a conversation between a human being and the divine. Thus, such a person respects all things around them. Respecting oneself, looking, once again, knowing how to see the divine in all things. Therefore, there is a respect for things that the ordinary person does not possess. Respect for an object, for a plant, for an animal. And, moreover, there is gratitude for belonging to that place, that family, that race. However, their identity is not rooted in these things. They would neither kill nor die for that. Do you understand? This does not limit them, it enriches them. I was born in Brazil, and Brazilian tradition enriches me. But I would not harm someone for not being Brazilian, nor fight over it, because each person has their own richness, and my identity is more than that. And you perceive, by your works I shall know you. By the trail they leave in the world, a simple and beautiful life. Vairagya is a purification that precedes an extraordinary love. Vairagya, do you remember that it is serenity? Without possessions or expectations, willing to let the beloved take their own path. So, notice, Vairagya is serenity, which is the foundation of this extraordinary love. Look at things thinking, how can I intervene in the destiny of things in such a way that they move toward their own good? So, if the good of this being is over there, I will not keep them here just because I don't want to be alone. There are no needs or dependencies. I guide each one in the direction of the good that belongs to them. I push things toward the light, and not in my own direction. That is neediness. That is attachment. That is wanting to be loved at any cost. Extraordinary love is self-sufficient and leads all beings to their destiny. That is very beautiful. He will share a phrase ahead that I find beautiful, truly Sri Ram, as he says. Love is without needs. Love is its own eternity. It is enough to be oneself. Profound love is its own little boat. It is its own eternity. This has everything to do with platonic love. It is enough to be oneself. A person is already whole by the very act of loving. They overflow with love in all directions, so there is no room for neediness. If they are working on this painting, they will do it with all the love possible. And, as they pour love in all directions, there is no room for lack. Now, selfishness comes and takes this entire 360-degree range of love you possess and focuses it on a single degree, onto just one being you have chosen to love. Just imagine 360 degrees gathered into 1 degree. This is like a laser beam. It will pierce the poor soul. Isn't that so? No one can bear it. It creates a level of possessiveness that no one can endure. It becomes suffocating. Human beings have the potential for love. 360 degrees. Wherever such a person goes, you can sense love. Imagine what a society made up of people like this would be like, and such a person would not experience lack. That which overflows has no need to absorb anything. A fountain that is always flowing will not wish to absorb water. Human beings possess this capacity for creation and happiness precisely because they overflow. Because they are human. Detachment, not aggression, autonomy, and so on. This passage is very beautiful. Pay close attention to it. Love is the pinnacle of these qualities. Otherwise, there will be frustrations, jealousy, and resentment. I have already spoken to you about this. In fact, want to love this way? All right, what now? I'll grab the brick. No, no, no. Dig a hole. Now, no. Bend the rebar, put it inside, and pour it in calmly. But where's the brick? In its own time. Is it like this? Lay the foundations, then place the deep iron structure according to the height of the building you want to construct. Pour the concrete inside, and proceed. The foundations are for you, so that one day you will be able to lay that little brick. Amaru. There are a series of prior virtues needed to structure a human psyche so that it can truly sustain genuine love. I was telling you the other day, brick by brick by brick. Now, it's the roof tile. All right, now it's the roof tile. I've laid a row of young people, and now I will want to come with the roof tile? You can't. There's no room for anyone inside. So, there are a series of prior feelings. Detachment, not aggression, which comes from being at peace with yourself. Autonomy, not depending on others, because if you depend on them, you will mistreat them. You won't allow them to walk the path that is meant for them. In other words, love is the pinnacle of these qualities. Otherwise, it's like 2 + 2 = 4. Then comes frustration, jealousy, and resentment. That's when the saying comes up that love should be infinite while it lasts. If it were truly love, it would be infinite, period. On this subject, Plato and Vinicius de Moraes do not quite see eye to eye. They do not agree, because for Plato, true love is infinite by its very nature, as it is a spiritual virtue. And in the spiritual realm, time does not exist. Therefore, it cannot have a beginning or an end. It simply is. It is. And this is very interesting. Qualifications for loving. All these things I am telling you so far, so that one day you may arrive and say, now I love. Otherwise, it is not possible. It cannot sustain or bear the weight of human love. Pure love, unconditional, not bound to memory or expectations, without regret or a sense of sacrifice for anything. A simple expression of what one is. Why do I do it? Photosynthesis? Because I am a plant. Why I am instinctive? Because I am an animal. Why I am resilient? Because I am a stone. Why do I love? Because I am a human being. Ah, because you will love me too. And we will be together for eternity. That depends on you. Do as you wish, and I will love. You can do nothing against this. It depends only on me. It cannot be conditioned by reaction, because otherwise it is an investment in the stock market. You love me, I love you. If the investment is not good, I will go somewhere else. How is that? It's like a private pension plan, an investment, just any transaction. Love is unconditional. It does not depend on you doing anything. It simply depends on whether I am capable of loving. I always share with you a little story, simple things. I like these simple examples because they are the ones we remember most. I remember when my daughter was very little, she had a serious health problem, and the pharmacist would come to our house to give her a lot of injections. Every day. I won't go into details about whether or not children should receive antibiotic injections, because that's a biological issue that isn't relevant here, right now. She was terrified of that pharmacist. He wasn't self-conscious, needy, or sad. He was happy. When we passed the pharmacy, she wanted to cross the street to avoid him. He'd say, how cute she is. Is she okay? Is she well? And she would. Imagine if he had been a needy pharmacist, thinking, oh no, she's not going to like me. The girl would have died, because then who would have helped her? He was prepared to be hated, to be despised, to be feared. But he saved the girl's life. Can you imagine that? A needy doctor? No. Antibiotic? No. An injection? The child will be angry with me. Everyone would have died. Isn't that natural? Isn't it obvious? So, love should expect nothing but the good of the beloved. If you expect anything else, it becomes difficult. And we know this. It is a matter of logic and common sense. And then, what he describes will never happen, the feeling of sacrifice. I sacrificed so much for you. Then perhaps you should have done those things, because now you present the bill. If you had acted out of love because you could do nothing else, there would be no bill to pay. But since you wanted to do something else and made a sacrifice, now there is a bill. So, it is a complicated matter. Did I sacrifice? No, I sacrificed you for many other things. Because for myself, I was loving all the time everyone who crossed my path. And I had to make sacrifices to do some other things that I was not yet able to love. Yet. But if I could, I would love everything, all the time. Because that is my nature. That is what fulfills me. So, when I loved you, it was the moment I was happiest. I made no sacrifice at all. There is no such duality. True love has no duality. Why do I love? Because I am, and there is nothing else to do. I am a plant. I perform photosynthesis. There is no point in asking anything else of me. I can't. Do you understand? So, there are no deals, no exchanges, no expectations, no past, no future. It exists in the present moment as a human being. This is very interesting. I find it very beautiful. Neither past, memory, nor future expectations. In the present moment, as a human being, one must be. So much so that when you look at the trail, you say, a human being has passed through here, because you notice a trail of love. How many human beings throughout history have left such a trail? Very few, right? Unfortunately. And how many human beings have we had already on the Earth's journey? A state of mind and heart that does not depend on circumstances awakens the security, joy, and peace that one used to seek outside. Now you are at peace. What can they take from you? What you have is inalienable. It is yours. Nothing and no one can take it from you. Everything that can be taken from you is not truly yours. And that brings us insecurity, fear, pain, and everything else. So, what was once sought outside is found within. And outwardly, you simply radiate what you are. You offer seeds. Well, the ground may be concrete, it may not sprout. But I have given seeds. In different circumstances, in different historical moments, there were very good people who did very similar things. And here the seed took root, and there it did not. Have you noticed? Because the conditions of the environment were different. But both are very calm and happy, I assure you. because they did what is expected of a human being. The rest, the circumstances, depend on things that, as Vezes, are not in our hands. The search for security generates fear. So, we are always looking for a firm point. Outside. And outside, there is not a single firm point on the face of the earth. This is a serious problem, perhaps geological, not philosophical. There is no firm point on the face of the earth. There is nowhere to lean on. If you do not support yourself within, you are lost. And this always leaves us unbalanced and insecure. Memory without attachment faces events as they arise, without anticipating or fearing them. The anticipation of things we do not even know, nor what they are, puts us in expectation of a doubtful future. And we lose a certain present. Once again, since today is International Cinema Day, in my lecture, I'm not sure why, but there is a very beautiful and also very well-known, relatively recent film called Gladiator. I don't know if you remember. There is a certain moment when that general, Maximus, who had become a slave, is at the center of an arena. And the enemies were coming from behind a door. He gathers everyone around him and says, "Whatever comes out from behind that door, if we stand together, we have a chance." I find that so beautiful. That door is the future. Whatever comes from behind that door, if you are solid, united with yourself, you have a chance. And when it comes, you see it, and you respond accordingly. But what you can do for the future is to be human in the present. There is nothing else to do. Oh, there are some practical measures. I can make a retirement plan. You can. These things are basic, but they do not guarantee you. If the country enters into civil war, your retirement plan is worthless. What truly secures a person is being human. There is nothing else that guarantees a person. So, whatever comes through the door of the future, be with yourself in a solid and loyal way. Be true to yourself. Julius Caesar, by Shakespeare, you must know this phrase, very beautiful and very well known. Cowards die many times, the brave only once. When does the brave person die? At the moment death arrives, they see what it is and die. The coward has been dying since the moment they were born. Oh, I'm going to die. Is it now? Ah, it's coming. Look, a wrinkle appeared. Look at the gray hair. What a torment. The brave face things as they arise, drawing upon the entire foundation of awareness they have built through many well-lived moments in the present. Then, when the future arrives, they live the future. Whatever comes from behind the door, we live, but we respond as human beings. There is a beautiful passage from a Buddhist book called Alita Vistara, in which Siddhartha Gautama says, "Whatever the demon Mara may bring, I will respond with righteousness. Whatever circumstances may come through illusions, I will respond with righteousness." In other words, send whatever you want, future. I will kick this ball as a human being would. And whether I score a goal or not, we shall see. But I will kick it as a human being, whatever it may be. I will respond with righteousness. But it's not just about being able to guarantee something like this. There is more to it. And this, Sri Ram calls human happiness. And finally, to bring our discussion to a close, from this freedom, because the person who is autonomous imposes themselves upon their environment, they possess freedom. This one has freedom. The other is like that feather from Forrest Gump. From this freedom arise love, strength, wisdom, beauty, and simplicity. He will say that the small self, which is the personal self, uses these words without understanding them, because these words, these virtues, do not live in captivity. They are not imprisoned within selfishness. You know those animals, like bears or pandas, that can't reproduce in zoos because they don't adapt to life in captivity? He says that human virtues are like that. In the captivity of selfishness, of the person who only thinks about the small self, me, these things do not grow. They simply don't. He will have all sorts of things, but they're kind of crushed, kind of poorly made. These virtues only grow in freedom. They require that a person grants them the freedom to expand. Trapped within the captivity of one's own selfishness, of egocentrism, of that small self, you speak of these things without truly knowing what you are talking about. They are empty words. Simplicity. What simplicity? Who is truly simple? Humility, beauty, love. What are these? Then comes that thing of mere opinion. I think it's this. I think it's that. It turns into a storm of guesses, as people commonly say. But there is no profound concept. Because we have no way to experience it, we have no space for it, they are all suffocated. All we have are seeds. Let us hope they do not become sterile. May we, at some point, be able to give them space so that they may sprout. Well, that's all for today. I know some of you have classes and other commitments, and today we went a bit longer. Today. But keep this idea of inner life as a starting point, and everything else will be added unto it, and of happiness associated with peace, with serenity.